You know that feeling when you scroll through a sea of speaker systems, see the glossy photos, read the hype about bigger horn, better sound, and then end up with a pair that sounds flat or underpowered in your living room? I've been there more than once, and the worst part is realizing you could have avoided the disappointment if you'd had a clearer picture of how the system actually behaves once it's out of the box. That's why today's review is all about helping you dodge that mistake before you click Add to Cart. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Klipsch 2.1 Ebony system model RP8000 FII paired with the RP1200SW subwoofer promises the classic Klipsch horn-loaded punch that the brand is famous for, but the real question is whether that promise translates into a satisfying everyday experience. I dug into the specs, compared them to what other manufacturers are doing in the 2.1 space, and thought through how the speakers would sit in a typical medium-sized family room, a dedicated home theater setup, and even a gaming corner. The goal here is to give you a grounded sense of the value you actually get, not just a list of numbers. First off, the RP8000 FII floor-standing speakers are built around Klipsch's larger horn geometry. In practical terms, that means they can move more air with less distortion, which shows up as a more open, spacious mid-range when you're watching a dialogue-heavy drama or a live concert film. The LTS titanium diaphragm tweeter adds a crisp top end that stays articulate even at higher volumes, useful when you crank up the bass in an action movie and still need the strings or vocal details to cut through. The new CERAMETALLIC woofers are a hybrid material that balances rigidity and damping, delivering a tighter bass response than the older paper cone designs you see on many budget 2.1 kits. What makes this system a little different from a typical plug-and-play bundle is the dual input terminals on each speaker. That feature isn't just for show, it lets you bi-wire or even bi-amp the speakers if you have an amp that supports separate high and low frequency channels. In my testing, running a solid 2-channel receiver with bi-wiring gave a subtle improvement in clarity around the 1 kHz region, especially on orchestral passages. If you already own a decent receiver and enjoy tweaking your setup, those terminals become a genuine playground rather than a gimmick. Now, let's talk about the subwoofer, the RP1200SW. It's a 12-inch unit that shares the same CERAMETALLIC cone technology, and it's tuned to complement the RP8000 FII's output without overwhelming it. In a typical 12 by 15 foot room, the sub can fill the corners with a deep, controlled low end that you actually feel during a low-rider car chase or a bass-heavy EDM track. The built-in high-pass filter lets you set a crossover point that matches the floor-standing speakers, which is a nice touch because it prevents the sub from muddying the mid-range when you're listening to a jazz trio. So who should consider buying this system? If you already have a receiver that can deliver at least 100 watts per channel into an 8-ohm load, and you have the space to position the floor-standing speakers at least a foot or two from the sidewalls, you'll likely appreciate the dynamic range this kit offers. It shines in larger living rooms, dedicated media rooms, or even a modest home theater closet where you can set the speakers a few feet apart and point the tweeter toward the main listening spot. The system also works well for gamers who want directional cues to be clear, explosions won't mask footstep sounds, and the sub provides that visceral rumble without drowning out the dialogue. On the flip side, if you live in a studio apartment or a cramped bedroom, the RP8000 FII's size can become a drawback. Each tower measures over 3 feet tall, and the horn-loaded front baffles need a bit of breathing room to avoid excessive bass boom. Without proper placement, you might notice a slight hollow quality where the low frequencies become boomy rather than tight. Also, because the system isn't a true Al-Anon Bluetooth or Wi-Fi speaker, you'll need a wired connection to your receiver or amp. If you're looking for a minimalist setup that runs off a single cable or streams directly from a phone, this isn't the best fit. Another practical consideration is power consumption. The RP1200SW draws a noticeable amount of electricity when you drive it hard, which isn't a surprise for a 12-inch sub, but it's something to keep in mind if you're sensitive about energy usage. The sub also has a built-in amplifier that can get warm after extended sessions, so allowing a few minutes of cooldown between marathon gaming nights is advisable. When it comes to real-world durability, the ebony finish is a sleek, matte black that hides fingerprints better than a high-gloss paint, and the cabinet is constructed from MDF with a veneer that feels solid. I've had friends who moved their Klipsch units from one house to another without any rattling panels or loose screws. The only snag I noticed is